We're live. Oh, nice. Oi, gente, tudo bem? Bem-vindos a essa terceira mesa de sábado, o dia mais cheio do festival. Hoje a gente está aqui com a Kiini Salaam, que eu aprendi hoje mais cedo o sobrenome dela, como pronuncia o nome dela, e vou falar um pouquinho do festival, né? Vocês provavelmente estão acompanhando, eu estou vendo um monte de mesmas carinhas nos comentários, fico muito feliz que tem muita gente assistindo. O festival ele foi organizado em uns 2 meses, mais ou menos, por iniciativa da Ana Rush e da Jana Bianchi, as duas se juntaram e aí chamaram um monte de gente e a gente fez acontecer, está sendo incrível. Antes de começar, queria falar que além da gente estar fazendo esse bate-papo de ficção científica e fantasia, a gente também a gente organizou tudo isso para poder levantar fundos para pessoas que não estão conseguindo sobreviver na quarentena, né? E por isso, a caridade que a gente está pedindo para vocês doarem hoje é o Sobrevivendo ao Coronavírus, que é um projeto aqui de São Paulo, que está arrecadando fundos para as pessoas mais necessitadas. E, nesse caso, são pessoas das periferias, né, que são mais pobres, né, como a gente sabe, né? Então, como o governo não está fazendo o papel dele, né, a gente tem que fazer. E é isso, vocês podem achar o link do projeto aqui embaixo no vídeo. Sempre quis fazer isso, você vem youtuber, o link está aqui embaixo. Mas também está no Twitter e no Instagram e no nosso site também, que está bem bonito que o Lee fez, além de estar coordenando tudo isso daqui, ainda fez um site maravilhoso pra gente. É isso, vamos começar então, vou apresentar nossos convidados. Primeiro eu vou falar da Kiini, que é americana, e ela é... Peraí, deixa eu achar aqui no meu roteirinho. Oh, meu Deus! Não está aqui no roteirinho! Oh, meu Deus! Bom, vou apresentar então as pessoas que são brasileiras e vocês já conhecem. O primeiro é o Fraser. Ele é o rei do... Ai, calma. Desculpa, gente, estou super nervosa. O Ian é o rei do Catarse e ele é famoso pelo Autorama, que é o nosso Senhor dos Anéis indígena. Somos super fãs, né? Estamos todos esperando o livro 3. E ele é da Bahia, ele é soteropolitano, e quando ele não está cuidando da gatinha paraplégica Golda, ele está criando histórias. O Ian escreve e produziu a peça de teatro A Máquina que Dobra o Nada, que foi vencedor do prêmio Braskem de Teatro. Escreveu os romances O Sangue e a Agreste, A Saga Aroarama, No Ar Carnavalesco e Mar 10, 1.0. Desculpa. E também o Rei do Catarse, como eu já falei. A Hailey Kaas, que também está aqui com a gente, é transfeminista, tradutora e escritora. Ela foi uma das responsáveis pela introdução do transfeminismo no Brasil, através de seus blogs com textos dedicados ao assunto. Atualmente, ela participa de diversas iniciativas com o objetivo de divulgar o transfeminismo no Brasil. Sua pesquisa circula entre as áreas de linguística, estudo do gênero, transfeminismo e teoria queer. Aquele também foi candidata do PSOL para vereadora ou deputada. Qual que foi, Hailey? Foi deputada, né? Meu Deus.
Deputada estadual.
Isso. Então, a gente fica esperando que na próxima eleição a gente possa votar nela de novo. Votem na Hailey. 5069, era isso?
5069.
Votem na Hailey. Seria ótimo ter alguém protegendo a gente. E eu vou falar da Kiini. Kiini, agora eu sei o nome. A Kiini é uma escritora, pintora e viajante nascida em Nova Orleans, na Louisiana. É filha do meio de 5 irmãos e cresceu em uma vizinhança árida com carvalhos e figueiras, gafanhotos e mosquitos, primos e vizinhos. O trabalho de Kiini lida com esferas da liberdade, conexão humana e evolução. Usa ficção especulativa, erótica e não ficção criativa para levar os leitores em jornadas alucinantes pelo transcendental, sensual, místico e fantástico. Suas obras de ficção especulativo já apareceram em publicações como Dark Matter, Mojo, Conjure Stories, Dark Eros, Femspec, Ideomancer.com, InfiniteMatrix.com e Podcastle.com. Uma das suas últimas e mais peculiares histórias, Of Wings, Nectar and Ancestors, foi traduzida para o polonês. Sua coletânea de contos Ancient foi vencedora do prêmio James T. Priest Jr., de 2012. E, atualmente, ela está aqui vivendo em Brooklyn, onde nós estamos. Então, eu vou mudar para o inglês, né, para a gente realmente começar a nossa mesa. Hi, first I really want to thank you all for being here and having this wonderful talk with us. We were speaking before we got in here that Salvador and New Orleans are the same place and have the same parties. So I'll let you start. Who wants to go first? Ian?
I could go first, but I would. Hailey, if you want to go first, please be my guest.
Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Helen Peyo, everyone who was involved, everyone for being invited to this wonderful gathering of people. And I think that especially now we need to talk and we need to feel part of a community, of a ecosystem. So thank you. I'm very pleased and very honored of being here. So while I was researching and getting to know Kiini before I get to know Kiini here now, I've stumbled into some interviews, and one that I really enjoyed, I listened to the end. It was on YouTube. Once, after being asked about how the place that you lived influenced your writing, you said, I think I have this double thing going on. I've always been a member of another tribe. Sticking to that train of thought, I have two questions. How much of the process of writing do you think derives from a self-analysis? And how does the magical and supernatural and speculative fiction elements of your writing help you digest the reality that surrounds you?
I think in terms of self-analysis, one of the things that I love to talk about, I also for a long time had a blog talking about writing, because I feel like sort of naturally, we're all gifted with a very unique voice. Like whoever you are, this person comes into space, they have their own energy, they have their own way of talking, and sometimes you really vibe with it, but that's creativity, you know, how you dress, how you talk, how you think. We all have that. That's part of being human, and I think it's a divine part of being human. But I think the challenge is with being an artist are all the conversation you have about your own humanity, right? So you're analyzing yourself all the time. Before you can even put down words on the page, do I have a right to write? You know, do I have something to say? You know, will anyone care? So for me, you know, there is self-analysis in what ends up on the page, but the first part of self-analysis is even managing yourself so that you can write. And so when I was younger, when I started writing, I was just like so excited. I was just writing. I have ideas and I put it down, but blah, 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 you know, and then coming into middle age where, you know, maybe now you have children, now you have all these barriers, you know, to writing. It doesn't feel the same. You know, I find myself, you know, I had gone through a very dark period of like, okay, I know that I have a voice. I know I have things to say, but I'm not doing it. And so I could either sink to the bottom and never speak again, or I could analyze myself and be like, okay, what's stopping me? What do I need? How can I move forward? So I'm really fascinated with the structures behind process. How do writers keep themselves going? Artists, I'm also a painter. How do you keep yourself going when all the ways of being that you're familiar with fail? It happens in regular life, but also as an artist, you know, you rely on a certain way of being, life changes, you change, and it doesn't work anymore. You know, what do you do? So I'm super into like process. Like in the past, it'd be like, why am I not writing? Why don't I believe in myself? I don't have those conversations anymore. I'm like, okay, you don't believe in yourself. What little thing can you do to move you forward? I don't really want to know why. Like, we're human beings. That's why we have these weird processes. That's why, you know. But what can we do so that more people are using their voice, more people are expressing their originality, and in doing that, we can know more sides of humanity, you know? So I think for me, the first place self-analysis comes into play is really in the actual process of writing. And then when I was getting my MFA, I attended this class. One of our teachers, Eloise Klein-Healy, she's a poet, and it was called Aboutness. And she wanted us to look at what are we writing about, like to get more conscious about it. So she had us look at a range of poems, a range of stories, and really write down what it's about. And that was really interesting, just seeing, like, at the time, I was basically complaining. Like, all my stories were just complaints, like, oh, the world's so unfair and life's so hard, you know? And it's interesting sort of to see where you're writing from and what's your motivation. And sometimes that leaks into actual craft. So in my case, maybe my characters didn't have a lot of agency, you know, they weren't driving the plot. So those are craft pieces, but it was being fueled by what was I writing about that I was unconscious, you know, about. I wasn't aware, you know, of what I was writing about. So that's the next level of self-awareness, that we're all putting like ourselves on the page, you know, whether we're conscious of it or not. And that in sort of taking a step back and looking at the things that you do, you can have a little bit more awareness of like, oh, I have a tendency to A, B, C, and D. I need to work on this in my craft. Even though it comes from a place internal, you can still sort of take a craft approach to it and deal with it. So that's where I land on the self-analysis. I don't remember your second question.
It was if it does happen, how does the magical and supernatural and speculative fiction elements of your writing help you digest the reality that doesn't particularly belong? The supernatural is obviously a fiction, but how does that help you digest the realness of the things that surround you?
I think for me, I just used magic to and magical elements to invest in a world that I believe in, you know. So I've heard many times that, you know, the Black experience is a sci-fi experience. Like, if you think about a people, you know, being captured by people who look completely different from them, taken on these huge like ships to another country, to a bunch of people who are also enslaved, but they don't speak your language. And so you're navigating this weird space. You know who you are, but the world doesn't seem to know who you are, you know, and then that being the legacy, and then sort of continuing on to this legacy that we're seeing now in these huge moment of uprisings, because ultimately and fundamentally, it's still a worldwide understanding that devalues Blackness. That's still something that's working today. So, you know, in my stories, I'm usually writing within a Black world, just validating the people who live there. And yeah, there's struggles, but they're more about who they are as human beings, and sort of not so much an external gaze, but more time to spend time with myself and within, you know, this community of Blackness. It's just a validating device for me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, Hailey's question is sort of about that also.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about Kiini's answer, because I can totally relate, especially when she said about not believing in herself. So I think that my question, and I want to just add something in the question, that is, how do you feel about, how do you deal with, because we know that imposter syndrome is something that a lot of minorities have, I am a trans person, and I also am a woman. So we know that the literature field is filled with white cis men, and anyway, it is difficult to navigate this world being part of a minority. And what I want to ask is, keeping that in mind, is how you're in your creative process, how do you deal with the pressure of reality and its impacts on your in fictional writing? Because we cannot deny that how the external world is impacting us as of today, especially because of the pandemic. And especially here in Brazil, and I think also United States, because now Brazil is the second country in the world to have more deaths by coronavirus, and in U.S. America is the first one. So how this external, this seemingly kind of I don't know, apocalypse or is this kind of dystopian scenario impacts your creative process, and that's the question.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. It's interesting too that a lot of the conversation it's all sort of linking together. Earlier, that quote about me being from a different tribe. I grew up, my parents were activists, and at a very young age, they were somewhat separatists, where they created this community with a bunch of other adults. They had their own school, they had their own food co-op. They did these work study sessions where they were studying thinkers from around the world. They traveled to communist China and to Cuba, and like had all these delegations. We had books, children's books about, the Chinese Revolution. We also had children's books about like a kid named X whose parents refused to name the kid's gender, and what that was like being in a preschool and this baby X, and at the end of the book, baby Y was born. So my parents sort of created this bubble, sort of this world building, in which we kind of got to develop an identity outside of the outside world. So I realize that I have an advantage when it comes to imposter syndrome. I have an advantage, not to say that I don't have it. It's just that I have a foundation of living in a world that I was not aware of all the attacks, or if I was aware of it, it was more through education, through what my parents were telling me. Of course, I had to go out into the world. Of course, I had to learn all these things and see how, all of these things play out. But I think it's done a few things. Like one, I think that ultimately I believe that, I know that I'm smart, right? I know that no one's smarter than me. Someone can be smarter than me, like in terms of IQ, right? I'm not an engineer, I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm not saying I'm the smartest person in the world, but I'm saying to live this everyday life, to do a job, to do what I need to do. I know that there's nothing more inherently valuable about someone else than me. Like I know that, right? And in navigating the world, knowing that what I love finding out is the background story of things. Like I love that. I love finding out that, before, a spaceship took off, there was a huge fight, in the coffee room, and this almost didn't happen, right? I love the fact that I work in an organization and I know so many organizations, you see the shiny commercial on TV, but 5 seconds ago was complete breakdown, right? Knowing how the world works, knowing that writer that was so perfect, that this thing that came together that seems so brilliant was a mistake, or it was somebody else's idea, or that, somebody paid their own publicity, whatever. Once you start digging into everything that has that sheen, you start to find out there's lots of humanity behind that mirror, right? So again, it comes back to that self-analysis that at the beginning, it's like knowing that you have imposter syndrome, you can say, okay, I have this. What relationship do I want to have to it? You can decide, okay, like my sister recently, she's in total breakdown. And I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? You know, how's about an hour a day we work on your studio? How's about, you know, whatever. And I like to get really technical with it, because the emotional side you could work on forever. You know, as a human being, you're not going to believe me if I tell you that you're brilliant and you're beautiful. I don't know what are going to be the tiny keys that you need to see it, to believe it, you know, but I do know that if I support you in taking this step and the next step and the next step, you will grow, and you will look back and say, oh, I was afraid to do A, B, C, and D. I'm still scared of like X, Y, Z, but at least now I know I have A, B, C, D, you know, in my pocket. So I'm super into like incremental growth, like understanding it, knowing that there's valid reasons, not saying that there's not oppression, not saying there's not people ignoring resumes because of people's names, not to say that I don't get invited. This happens to me a lot. I'll get invited to write something, and my stuff is weird, right? I'll get invited to write something. They know my stuff is weird. I'll write it, and it's not what they wanted, and I get rejected from the anthology. Even if they promoted me as being in the anthology in the ramp up, I'm not in it. That happens a lot. But it's not because there's anything wrong with me. It's because I didn't meet whatever vision they had. They had a story that they read of mine. All my stories are very different from each other. They're not the same. So you might read one that's like real world, and then I might give you one that's like in the middle of a meteor, and you're like, what's this, you know? And I just have to accept that about myself. I'm not going to be everybody's taste. Is that going to change who I am? No. You know, I definitely had to come to a point where I had to ask myself, why am I writing? You know, if I'm not publishing, which I was not doing for a number of years in between, you know, parenting and all that stuff. Why am I writing? Why am I here as a human being? What do I have to bring the world? And if I know those three things, it really doesn't matter what happens. You know, it really doesn't matter. I'm not writing for your validation. I had to learn that about myself, because even while I was not publishing, I still got this sort of need to write. And it really pissed me off, because I was like, look, I don't have the energy to write. I'm not publishing. Why do I have this need to write? Well, that's who I am. I'm a writer. So whether I publish it or not, I'm a writer. I had to accept that about myself. You know, I know that I'm a valuable human being. I know that I have durable and important relationships to people. I know to at least one person I matter. That's who I am in the world. I know who I am, you know? So knowing those things and holding on to those things when something challenging happens, when you get knocked down, when you get discriminated against, when you get discounted, is what helps you continue to live out of your center instead of out of what's happening, you know, around you. I hope that made sense and answered your question. I might have missed a part of your question.
No, I think that you answered it really well. And if I may add, I asked this because especially in this moment of that you have to stay home, and you have this pressure to be productive, you know, in home, and when you have several other things to do, like, and this involves, of course, the third and the fourth turn in cleaning the house, that this kind of chores and work that end up on being a women's work, that is an invisible women's work, yes. Right? That no one sees, and people think that we stay home and we can be really productive, but it's not like that. Right. And this pressure to be productive is something that is it kind of for me, at least, is kind of paralyzing. I end up not doing anything. So it's good to hear you, because it's a really good way of putting it. Like it can be good, or it doesn't matter if what you're producing is if you are self-doubting. You just have to do it. So because it's best if you do it than not doing it, even if it's not what you would expect, and because you wouldn't wait for like the perfect time, the perfect moment for writing the perfect story, or in my case for translating really well, because it's not gonna happen.
Right.
So,
right.
But I don't know if Ian or Deborah want add something, or if I can just ask my second question.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to say that in the comments, people are saying that Hemingway used to say that you sit in your typewriter and bleed your heart out, and that is what we do. So, yeah, they're right, I guess. It's what we do. Well, you can go on now. Hailey wants to start. with our second question?
Yeah, I think that, well, I don't know if Ian want to.
Yeah, does Ian want to say anything?
I thought that the dialogue, the conversation, sorry, was marvelous. I was just processing here a lot about what you said, Hailey, about being productive, and I majored in movies, filmmaking, so semiotics, the study of signs and what represents was one of the classes that I most enjoyed, and we're now forcing ourselves to re-signify every part of our lives. You said, Hailey, that we have to to engage in things that we were not, which we usually engaged on different days, like cleaning the house and that kind of stuff. But for me, for example, is I'm living alone. I'm by myself, and I've always, and this is a very small thing, but if you look at it, it's big. I've never cooked for myself. I never needed, because I eat where I work. So that had to, my house changed. My house now is my work, where I work. This computer here that I'm talking to you guys is my personal computer, but now it's my work computer also. So my privacy seems to be changed, and I thought that was very interesting, because it is about re-signifying, or whatever the correct word is, a lot of things about ourselves and the things that surround us. That was the thing that was processing while you were talking. So yeah, no, I don't have any questions, just what was going in my mind. So please go on.
Well, I was going to say that in terms of the quarantine, I'm actually, I think, benefiting from it a lot, because with the commuting, I have a pretty intense job. And so when I get home, I'm like flat on my back. I'm not, I'm done. I can't do anything else. But now that I don't have to commute and I'm working from home, I feel like I have more energy. So what I've been doing is I've been participating in more communities. So I have a writing group that I was completely ignoring, so that I'm participating in that. I'm participating in two creative groups where I'm just meeting and we're creating together. And that came out of necessity, because I'm sitting down and painting and I'm hearing my voice saying, you don't know where you're going with this. This is not the right color. Like, I'm hearing all this negative talk in my mind. And all this time I've been saying, I can't paint because I'm working too much, And now I'm home and I'm painting, and I realize I have all these voices in my head that is a barrier between me and the art. And so along the lines of what I was saying, what I did was I called my sister, my cousins. I was like, let's have an art club. Like, I'm having issues and I need to get through this, And so now we meet and we do the art together. And I still complain, but I know that it's in me. Like, I know the art's there. I know the mental chatter is something else and I need to deal with, And I don't think I would have the energy. I also, have a group where we're writing letters to different politicians around all the political stuff that's happening right now in the States. I would never have the energy to do any of this while I was doing my day job. I would just be like, oh, life's so hard. I got to lay down, So I know that for some people, this is really a challenging time, but for me, it's been a really rich time to be able to refocus on myself and commit to some of the creative things that are important to me and that matter to me. And I'm so grateful. Like, I can't even describe how grateful I am to be able to focus on myself a little bit more. Also, I'm not living alone too. I have my kids. So my friend who does live alone always reminds me of that. She's like, oh, you have someone there with you. It's totally different. I get it. I got company privilege.
Yeah, actually, the Hilampeo wouldn't be happening if we weren't in quarantine. I don't think anybody would have time, or would have thought about doing this, an online event. Well, Hailey's next question is sort of about that, producing in hard times.
Actually, I inverted. I asked my first question. It was my second one in the script, but
oh, okay.
So now, actually, this question is related to the George Floyd's protest. So, which I think that it has a huge impact worldwide, and even also here in Brazil and in a lot of other countries. But the question is, race and racism have been large topics for the last weeks because of the reaction to George Floyd's murder. As a Black woman, how do you see the intersection of race and gender that seem to always be lacking in discussions, both about racism and about gender? And if you may say also specific in literature, and how do you perceive this lack, or maybe I'm wrong, I don't know how things work out in the United States, but how things, how these elements, like they relate to each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same here. It's really hard because the issues that are on the table right now are undeniable, you know? And it's hard because I think that sort of lack of visibility for various people, various different types of people, it all ends up being a similar conversation of like, you know, who are we validating? Who are we ignoring? You know, who are we upholding and who are we abusing? So, I mean, on the one hand, it's like, you know, I'm in awe of everything that's happening right now. I'm like in awe of, you know, sort of the conversations that are being had right now. I'm in awe of the range of the conversations and the way different people are responding across the world and also within the United States. But I just don't even know. Sometimes I sit down and just think about like humanity and human beings and like we're struggling and like, are we going to get anywhere? Like there's some theories that we are just by nature hierarchical and we are going to find a way to dominate each other no matter what, you know? And I don't know, like, is that really true? Or is it, is there some other way of existing? And I think that's part of, I guess, the push and pull of being human, is that we do have this strain of like dominance, but then also we have this vision for a better future. And, you know, you can't stop pushing towards it, you know? So while everyone is sort of throwing their hat behind this George Floyd thing, the other thing that's happening is there's a woman named Brianna Taylor who was killed by police officers serving a no-knock warrant, meaning they just ran into her home. And the person they were looking for was already in custody. They didn't announce themselves. So her boyfriend thought that there was intruders. So he starts shooting. They shot and killed her. And then their initial response to that was to arrest the boyfriend and try to find a way to show that, you know, they were in the wrong. So what's happening in parallel to what's happening with George Floyd is a huge push for justice for Brianna Taylor. And this has been historical. We have these names that we can rattle off of Black men who have died in police custody. And there are Black women who also have died, whose names are not as well known, you know. It's a hard balance because it's like we need to have those conversations that are being had, but there's so many conversations to have, you know. So I'm wrestling with that. I don't, you know, I think another person would be able to answer that question better. But as I wade into the questions of what's happening, I'm wading into politics. You know, there's a Brooklyn DA who charged. So I don't know if you're also seeing with all these protests. In these protests, police are abusing people in the protests about police brutality. You know, they're knocking people over there. I mean, it's incredible the amount of video you have of police just circling people and just beating them with their batons at a police brutality protest, right? And so a Brooklyn district attorney charged one of these police officers who knocked a woman over so hard that she had seizures, whatever. And as I was talking about this on Twitter, another person in a completely different DA's office was saying, well, there's limitations and should it always be a criminal act, and asking all these questions. You know, I was watching the Commission on Police Brutality, which Congress is having, right now. And, you know, there's one government representative who agrees, and there's another government representative who only agrees with part of it. And then you start talking, and it's just like, it's a river. It goes on, you know, it just goes on. Like, you know, women's issues are important. You know, people of color's issues are important. Trans issues are important. And I really like wonder, like logistically, how are we going to get to a place where we're sustaining everyone's humanity? You know, there's so many competing interests. There's so many financially competing interests. There's privilege interests, power, of course, privilege, power, money, all of that stuff. And I don't have an answer. You know, I'm actually right now just trying to find my legs and to see, like, you know, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and I talk to my community about this all the time, but is there a real way forward? You know, these are the questions that I'm asking myself. But I do believe that as a Black woman, one of the things my friends would always say, he would do things like, there was this poem that he brought me, The Cinnamon Peeler's Wife. I should remember the poet's name. He's a famous poet. And it's about the cinnamon peeler's wife, and she smells like cinnamon because he touches her. And so he showed me this poem. It's like, oh, is it so beautiful? And I was like, well, she smells like that because of him. Like, that's what this poem is about. It's really about him. You know, we don't even know her, you know. And he was like, why do you always have to talk about this woman stuff when I'm trying to bring you some beautiful art? And he wasn't being aggressive, but I mean, that's who I am, right? I'm never going to stop speaking up for women's issues. And you talk about the invisible work of women. There's also that type of work, even in offices. You know, you don't have to be a woman to do that type of work, but that type of logistical work, that type of support work, how things happen, who's organizing those things, that traditionally is put on women and seen as invisible. And there's a lot of, I saw a few articles about progressive, even in progressive partnerships, you'll see, you know, a gender divide in terms of the work of child rearing. And there was an article about it where, you know, at this point, they interviewed some of the men, and they were like, well, if I shirk it off long enough, I can get away with it. And basically that was the whole rationale. I don't do it because I can get away with it, you know? And so we're hitting up against this privilege conversation. I think the reason why we've been able to have so much inequality for so long is that I think people are afraid to look at white privilege. Like, I'm a white person and I have privilege. What does that make me, you know? And not able to kind of divide themselves, say, I'm a human being and there's white privilege and I don't believe in it, you know? And so I've been challenging, you know, as I'm talking to white friends and white community members and they're struggling with it, I'm like, well, where do you want to stand in relationship to white privilege? Like, you can separate yourself from that. But privilege is like as I saw on Twitter, it's a hell of a drug, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, being willing to like let go of, you know, the things that feel good for someone else's good and for the betterment of society. Can we convince human beings to do that? That's the question. Can we convince men to do that? Can we convince straight people to do that? Can we convince white people to do that? Can we convince rich people to do that? Can we convince able-bodied people to do that? Like, all of the things, because isn't it easier to have a building and not have to think about access? You know, sure. Is it cheaper? Sure. Are we better human beings because of it? No, not really, you know? And so I think it just all really comes down to that willingness to be uncomfortable, you know, even to have the conversation, just first of all, to even have the conversation, to bring in somebody else's reality, to consider a different perspective, you know? And I think that's really, I guess, as a person, as a human being, that's where my core is, like really wanting to understand and really wanting to be able to communicate across, you know, barriers. What's my experience over here? What's your experience over there? You know, and how do we come to a place of you know, building together? I feel like I took a walk through a forest when you wanted me to drink from the well, but that's my answer.
That's great. That's great.
Brianna?
Well, yeah,
I'm still processing.
Well, I'm a man. I'm considered white in Brazil, and what I can say, what I think is that I think that the conversation helps. I do believe that the privilege is hard to break, but I do believe that once the conversation is being replicated enough, I do believe that the changes are coming on the sense of the conversation change. We are based on language. We are based on words and stories, and I do believe that. So from my perspective, when I want to speak, the first thing that processes me is I don't want to hurt people that I love, and does my voice matter on that subject? So if it's happening to me, I believe it's happening to other people, and I think it's slow. I was thinking about changing a little bit of the subject. Like, I was thinking about my grandmother. She was American, and she was one of the big pillars of my construction as a person. And she died with 93. I think she was 93 or 92. She saw almost the birth of movies. She saw America segregated. I believe she never told me, but when you catch little stories, I believe that her first love was a black man, and she couldn't date him because of what America was when she was a teenager. And so she saw those things. She saw wars. She saw telephone becoming mobile. She saw TV coming into color, and those changes are very big, and because they're technological. But the human changes, she also saw a lot of human changes, and I do believe that the conversation helps, and I do believe that opening space for people to talk is definitely changed me as a man, as understanding my privilege. So yeah, I'm a little bit optimistic, but maybe that's because I have the privilege of being optimistic, because I live a comfortable, life. You're talking about people who died. I remember watching an American program where it was just the audio of a police intervention in a car, and it was a black couple, and the policeman was being very aggressive, and he shoots the guy, and the black woman was still calling, "Officer, please, he's not." And the reporter said, "Look how different things are. She's still calling him officer. She's still engaging on the ways of being a black woman being stopped by the police." And I do not know what that is. So once I know that I do not know what that is, I think that it helps me be a better human being, So yeah, I think the conversation helps a lot in that sense.
Yeah, and I taking that point to flip back to the imposter syndrome question. I read things and remember them and don't remember where I read them, but I read something where some fable in some culture, I don't know, about a man who had two sons, and one was a poet and one was a military man. He prayed that his son's words would be remembered forever. And when he died and his children died, his poet son's words were forgotten, but his military son's orders of operation were used forever in the army in this country, and it just reminds me that we don't have power over what happens with our work. We put out what we put out authentically. Sometimes we'll succeed by whatever measures we can fathom, and sometimes we won't. So when I think about imposter syndrome, I also think, you are an original human being with an original voice. If you do your work, you have no idea what impact that work can have. Like, even if you do your work and you never sell it, and you pass away, you really don't know. You could still change the world. There are like little known people who's made a huge impact on us, as we go and research and recover and learn. So I think in terms of thinking about imposter syndrome, it's like, maybe I don't want to speak up because maybe I don't have the right, or I don't, whatever. But it's also, I like to think about just, who knows, like the way that you communicate could be the thing that we need in now, or in 10 years, or in 20 years, or decades or centuries later, to take us to the next level of, humanity, and that's why I believe in, like, just trying to make sure I encourage everyone who has, any kind of inkling, oh, I have this idea, oh, I want to try this, I'm always the one that's like, oh, you should do it, and here's how, and do you want me to call you? And like, I think that there's some power and magic into using your voice, and it connects into humanity in ways that you can't really perceive or know, And so I think I hold on to that in terms of using your authentic voice, whether or not, the people who believe they belong there, whether or not they get me or not, or get you or get whoever, I think there's a community who needs to hear it. And you may not meet that community, but by putting it out there, you're participating in the human conversation.
I think that linking this with the privilege thing, I think that even though it is important in an individual sense to try to deconstruct this kind of idea of deconstruct our self-privilege in different fronts, I think that what we're seeing here today is the put of the privilege being put on behalf of a greater solidarity good, like when you see white people in the front line protecting Black people in protest. So I think that this is like a way of putting one's privilege in use of not in individuals, not only in an individual sphere, but also in a community and a social greater sense. And I think that, in my opinion, my view, this is the way we have to work the privilege issue towards, and I was amazed by this kind of initiative, and I think that people need to do, in this case, white people, because when you say when people like to say, white people love to say that, oh, I recognize that I have privilege, etc. But what are you doing with that privilege? Because it has been granted to you. I don't think that one can throw this privilege away as long as we have structural racism in society. So what do you do with your privilege? You can aid in the fight against it, or you can just acknowledge that you have it, and it doesn't. It won't make any difference in my view. So I think that's important to do something about it in a collective sense. Not just because we have a say here that specific about trans issues, that we have a lot of this problem. I know that Black people and other minorities also have this problem, but of people talking on behalf of trans people. So I usually say that if a cis person or if a white person want to talk about Black people or trans people, they would not talk on behalf of Black or on behalf of trans people, but I can talk of you, not on behalf of you. Then I can give visibility to your causes, to your plight, and to, because it is important. I think that it's important for white people, for cis people, etc., for straight people, to give visibility to our causes, because it's a fact that these people will have more voice. We have an amplified voice in different parts of society. So something that I may say, and something that a cis people say, and a cis person would be taking into account, and I wouldn't. So anyway, I think that we have to put privilege into use.
Yes, absolutely. The thing that's interesting about this moment is that I'm seeing so many different responses to it, and one of those is amplifying Black voices. So I saw this campaign on Instagram, once again, holes in my memory, I don't remember what it's called, but white women were sharing their platform with Black women. So Black women would go on their platform and, you know, promote whatever it is that they were promoting. And so, like, for example, there was one woman who I knew was doing pretty well, Black woman. I looked at her followers. She has, you know, like, 100,000 something followers. So I was like, oh, okay. So she needs somebody to share the mic with her. And so then I went to see who was sharing the mic with her, and she had like millions of followers. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well.
Like, yeah. And you could say that Black woman with hundreds of thousands of followers, she's using her voice. She has a platform. She's got a best-selling book. She's doing amazing for a Black woman, you know? But to know that there's so many different levels, like no matter where you stand, there's another realm of influence out there. So I was thinking about what you said in terms of not speaking for people, but also inviting people into your space and giving them access to some of your resources, you know, is, you know, super important to acknowledge, like, you know, some of this I have just because I was born this way, you know, and I can share this with someone who doesn't have access to the same, you know, ease.
Well, Ian still has a question, actually, and we have so many questions from the public. And sadly, we can't stay here forever. So I'm sadly going to have to filter them down. I'm so sorry, public. But Ian,
Deborah, I would gladly see. I have a question. It's prepared, but I would gladly open the question if the public. I think that this platform works because we're exchanging. So if you want to use the time to gather another question from the public that you like, I am glad to open it for the public.
Okay, I guess we'll do that because there's so many.
Okay.
Apparently, this is the record of questions on all the Hilampeu. So
wow.
Makes us very happy.
Please, no. So I'm happy to open and let the people speak, please.
Okay. Well, the first question is from Paulo Vinicius, and he was asking about talking for other people. So since he already asked that, we already talked a lot about that. So I'm going to jump to this one. Oh, this is nice. Sugar Sweetie asks how you put who you are in your different artistic expressions, like painting and writing, and if there's a difference for you.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. By the way, I call my daughter Sweetie all the time. So.
Oh, that's nice.
So for me, writing is more intellectual. It's more logistical. It's more problem solving. So the barrier there is like, I have to think, I have to process, I have to, you know. And so what I've been working on as I get older and mature as a writer is surrender. Like I've been working on letting things be what they are. I've been working on partnering with editors and not feeling like I have to write a book on my own. So, you know, in the past, what I would do is if I was writing a story that I had to submit, I would do like a minimum of like 4 or 5 drafts before I even shared it with the editor. You know, it's great that I'm doing all that work, but it also kind of leaves me, you know, spinning in a way. So I've been recently turning things in after 2 drafts, 3 drafts with the mental state of 1, I'm surrendering to whatever this thing is, that I trust that the heart of whatever it is in there, even if my words aren't perfect. 2, I'm not on a journey alone. You know, like there's editors here that I'm working with and working, you know, that I'm collaborating with. They can give me feedback. I can use their notes, you know. So it's been very interesting. I remember the first time an editor said, hey, just write me something rough and share it with me, and then we can talk about where it's going. I was just like horrified. I was like, no, you know, I can't do that. But now I think I won't survive as a writer if I don't start surrendering some of that. If I don't stop trying to be perfect, you know, if I don't trust more that, you know, what I write has value, and yeah, it may need edits, it may need fixes, but I can, you know, carry on. So and I'm working on trusting the process, you know, so I have a very, regimented sort of way of working, which is like, okay, today I'm gonna write this many words. Tomorrow's an editing day. I'm gonna edit this many pages, you know, and I make those goals for myself. And then I'm constantly texting people like, I have to write again, like whining like a baby. That's part of my process. I accept it. But there is a level of intellectualism involved in writing that once I get in there, though, like once I hit that sweet spot, I'm in there and I'm flowing and it's like time's flying and I know what to say and it's spiritual and everything. But it takes more to get me there, you know. With the visual art, it's more intuitive. Like I know something's wrong, but I can't solve it intellectually. It's more like, oh, let me try this color here. Let me try this line here. I have to try it. It's experiential. And recently I went to a workshop where they were talking about building to learn. That, you know, our instinct, especially as adults, is to like think, like I have to build this thing. Let me plan. Let me do some, you know, research. Let me this, let me that. And you look up and 2 months have passed, 2 years have passed. You've built nothing, you know? So building to learn, sort of, that's what you have to do with art. You have no choice. Like you have to start creating. You're not going to like make it up and figure it all out before you start putting the marks on the page. And actually, I went through this little process of like figuring out what my blocks were and like working on it at the beginning of the quarantine. And I have been using that process to hold myself together mentally. Just the idea of starting something and not knowing where it will end up. That's the quarantine, you know. We don't know where we're going with this virus. We don't know what's coming. Being in the middle of something and not liking it, you know, and trusting that I'll get somewhere good. So I've been using all of the sort of things that I have to manage in myself to create the art, to keep myself sane during this time of all this unrest and questions. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think you did. It was really nice. Thank you so much. What else do we have here? Ricardo Santos. I'm going to put these two together because they're similar and short. So Ricardo Santos wants to know if you know Brazilian speculative literature, and Giovanna Bomente would like to know who are the people that inspire you, literary or not.
I don't know a lot about Brazilian speculative fiction literature, and am open to learning. So if that person wants to chat and I should look out for, please send them. And Deborah, I'm sure you would share them with me.
Sure.
Yep. In terms of inspiration, I get inspiration from anywhere. Like I'm inspired by humanity, number one. I'm inspired. One of the things I love about living in New York is that there's so many artists here and I get to watch their hustle. There are people who like, I don't even know, but they're kind of in my community. And I'm watching like, oh, she did this show. Oh, she built this thing. I'm watching, how are people like expressing themselves? How are they finding their voice? And it means so much to me. In terms of books, I hate to say something because then it makes me feel like I missed something super important. But one book I read that's on my mind right now is Book of the Night Women by Marlon James. He's a Jamaican writer who now lives in the United States. And he writes in Jamaican patois, which is a form of English, but it's set on a plantation. And he starts off writing in a bridge type English where you can kind of get it, and then he slips all the way into the patois. And one of the things that book really cemented for me, there's a lot of criticisms about Black people about like the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we parent, like everybody's policing the way Black people behave. But one of the things that was very interesting about that book is that there was a character who was very like, she was very vibrant, you know, she had a lot of light in her, and her caregiver was really mean and was really like trying to beat her down. And over the course of the book, you realize this act of this parent doing this was actually very loving, because if she let that child walk out of the door feeling full of herself, she was going to be murdered by all the powers that be, you know? And I think a lot about Black parenting and the complexity of parenting a child where you want them to be safe, you want them to be full of themselves in a positive way, but you also want them to know that there are people out there who will harm them, you know? And so that complexity and hearing that history of like literally during the time of enslavement, a Black parent had to find a way to diminish their child's energy and light so that they didn't, like a toddler, imagine being a Black toddler on a plantation, you know, they had to find ways to save their children in a twisted and horrible, you know, society. So just thinking about that, that was very rich for me to think about that in terms of the legacy of, you know, what we're continuing to try to do to manage sort of white supremacy, basically. I saw a video of these parents talking about how they speak to their children about the police. And one parent has this whole speech that he teaches his kids. And this poor little 9-year-old has her hands up and she's like, I'm unarmed. I'm not here to hurt you, like 9 years old. And I'm getting choked up thinking about it. But he's doing that because he wants her to be safe, you know? So just reading that book was really a rich experience for me to remember, you know, sort of the legacy of what we've been fighting all this time.
Oh, that's so much. Well, I just found out that Bill Campbell was watching your live, and he told you to knock him dead, and I'm sure you're doing that from all the comments that we're receiving. And Hailey, you have a lot of fans on the comments as well. This one is nice also. Priscila Satan asks if you expect your readers to find out who they are through what you write, and how the sensuality can contribute to a me.
Yeah.
This is hard to translate.
Just very quickly, just because I was sharing book titles, I do just want to share also N.K. Jemisin, who is an amazing spec fic writer who's, you know, pretty well known, but I still want to shout out just the complexity of world building that she does is incredible. So if anybody's unfamiliar, I would highly recommend any of her books. And Nnedi Okorafor also doing fine on her own. She doesn't need the shout out from me, but with African speculative fiction, who's very grounded in Nigerian culture, which is where her family roots are, very imaginative, creative work. So I just want to make sure I shout out my sisters.
Yeah, we have them both here already translated, which is really nice.
Yeah. In terms of finding yourself, I mean, I think sensuality and sexuality are both very interesting sort of areas of expression. You think about when you have children, you have to teach them to ignore the sexual parts of their bodies, right? You have to be like, here, this is your head, this is your knees, and we'll just ignore what's in between your head and knees. You know what I mean? Like, and kids, you know, they play with those parts of their bodies, and we just have to teach them, nope, you can't do this. You could go in your room, or don't touch yourself, or whatever. So there is, I don't have a fully realized thought about it, but there is a very, I think, authentic connection between who you are as a person and sort of your sexual or sensual expression. And I think that when I think about a whole person, the erotic is always a part of it. It's not necessarily like in front of anything, but it's always sort of a part of it. And that's why I, you know, use it in my work, that it feels like it's just part of the deepest part of who someone is, you know, who they are as an individual, as a human being. And in terms of readers, I think that one of the criticisms of my work is that I just kind of drop people in whatever world that I'm in. I don't kind of like take them by hand. There's a hill, and on the hill there's a house, and in the house there's a moth. Like, no, like we're already in there. And people are like, it took me like 2 pages to understand what's happening. That's a criticism that I get. But I just love just stepping into experiences. And that's really what I want for the readers, that they step into a whole different world. One of the things that I love about traveling is being destabilized and being in a different culture, because, you know, if you don't travel, And if you don't leave your home culture, and that could even be within your country to different regions, you kind of think your way, this is like privilege. You kind of think your way is the only way to do something. And naturally you think it's the right way to do something, But I think when I'm traveling, when I see that people gather in different ways, people have family structures in different ways, people have their homes in different ways, it just opens for me the possibilities of what being human is. And then I get to ask myself a question. Am I living this way because I want to, and it's an expression of me? Or am I doing it because that's what the dominant culture I live in says that's the way it should be? So what I hope is, like, when people read my stories, they're kind of like, it touches something in them and it makes them reflect on their own experiences and say, yeah, I actually feel the way I thought I felt. That is me. And it was great to consider something else. Or, this other thing is making me rethink this. And, actually, I want to have a conversation with so-and-so about this or so-and-so about that. I used to write nonfiction as well. And I wrote this essay about date rape or non-consensual sex. And I got letters from guys, from men saying, oh, is that why this woman just laid here like that? Is that why, and I wrote the article intentionally, not saying you're wrong, you're a rapist. I intentionally wrote it in a way that was like invitational, because I wanted men and women and whoever reads the article to think about the experiences and not shut, the door down. And I think for me, when somebody reads something and then they come out of it, either knowing something new about themselves or about the world, and that's powerful, and then I've done something noteworthy and, something I can be proud of.
Oh, it's so nice. I never know how to ask the next question because you're so amazing. It leaves me speechless. This is thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Vilker Martins has a lot of questions. Let me see the best one. There's one here that is that there are theories that literature and art should be free, but considering the necessary deep social inclusion for a better world, is it the time for writers to use their writing with a social function?
Well, I mean, the quote that means a lot to me is that the personal is political. So I don't think you have to consciously use your art for a specific function for it to meet a social need. Just by me writing, about my experiences and being authentic about it, that does fill a social function. Just by being here, I don't have to write specifically about, a social issue to be adding to the conversation. And I think authenticity is something that we don't always do. And we think we're being authentic, and we're not, we're not actually being authentic. And I think if everyone were writing from a real authentic place, I think that would push a lot of social conversations forward. I was on a panel with a white author in sci-fi, and he, sells books easily and not necessarily writing about anything of any, consequence. And he said on the panel, he was like, yeah, I don't write about other things because I don't have to, basically, but is it authentic? Does he move through a world in which the only thing that exists is something that looks like his mirror? No. Like, I'm sitting next to him at a panel, you know what I mean? So no. There are other experiences in your world. There are things that you're thinking about. There's things that you're grappling with. In this moment, an authentic reflection on what white privilege is from a white person could be something that really is key to other white people grappling with these questions themselves, I personally don't like the term ally that everybody likes to say. I'm an ally, because I feel like if you're an ally, you're doing it for me. And I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it because you believe that's who you are as a human being, because you want a world that looks like, equity. I don't want you to want it for me, because then the minute that you are, bored, tired, hurt, it's not important anymore. It has to be something that means something about you. And I think that's what's been missing from this whole conversation, this whole idea of how can I help you? No, you're sitting in the shit. Like, I'm fine. Like, you're sitting in the shit. You're creating these walls. Do you want to live like this? is that okay with you? You know, and if not, what do you want to do about it? You know? So I think really, really being authentic is always a huge, huge socially political act.
Vanessa Guedes, hi Nessa. She wants to know how the isolation and the public protests are influencing what you write. Have you been doing any writing by now?
Yes, I'm working on 2 projects right now. One of them was already sort of in the place it's in before all this happened. The other one, I'm writing in the moment, and I ended up having to change it based on the conversations that are happening. And what's really interesting about right now, and I think I've said it already, is just the velocity of the conversations going on. The idea of even saying defund the police, and the idea of there being politicians who on record are saying that they agree with this is like wild. It's completely wild. And the week before, you know, the Minneapolis City Council said that they were committed to it, it seemed like, you know, something that just the protesters were, you know, that it mattered just to the protesters. So having these conversations, basically, I just feel that, you know, there hasn't been a really authentic sort of conversation about what white supremacy is, what it means to be an oppressed class in, you know, anywhere, not just the United States, anywhere. And I remember when Trump was elected president, for a lot of progressive white people, that was extremely painful. There were tears. And I had conversations with white people that I would not have had the day before. Like, they were open to hearing about inequality in a new way because Trump was elected president, right? And so then the conversations already changed, right? So now we're here at this moment where Black people have been killed by the police multiple times. It's been caught on camera multiple times. It's been litigated multiple times. This is a country where they will not hold the police officers accountable. They will not hold the police precinct accountable. They will let them off, but then there will be a civil case in which the police are found negligible, and then they will pay millions of dollars to the family of the people who, you know, who lost someone. $5 million payouts, $3 million payouts in a capitalist society. It's like, it's screwy, you know? And this conversation has not reached here until now, you know? And it's incredible. I don't really understand what's happening. I don't know how durable it's gonna be. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I'm having conversations that I could not have had last week, a month ago, you know? So in terms of the writing, how real I can be in a mainstream publication is changing. You know what I mean? By the week. Is like, last week it was one thing, this week it's something else. I can say this now, you know, not to say that I couldn't say it before, of course I could, but just in terms of, you know, the listening, you know, it's incredible. So yeah, so the thing that I'm working on now it's for children. And it is going deeper and deeper into, you know, the history of like police brutality and, you know, white supremacy, and the words I use will be different. You know, all of those things will change. And I still don't know where we're going to end up sort of in this conversation in this moment. So I'm just along for the ride.
This is actually really great because Brazil has, I think, the most violent police ever in the world, and they kill a lot of people all the time, and they have the habit of killing children in Rio de Janeiro a lot. So, and it's funny because we've been talking about this for years here, but I think it's stuck in this very small circle of people. I think like students and people from the favelas and stuff talk about these things, but they don't really get to the general public. People, I don't think they really care. You know, we have a military police from our dictatorship that is still there for some reason. And it's great because, well, it's not a good thing, but we have to try to be optimistic, I think, about things that since this conversation is happening in the States, now it's coming here again, and it's larger, which is great. So
yeah, I read an article about hair in Brazil about a kid who was harassed by the police, and they were aggressively telling him they didn't like his hair, and he cut it, and it was just all about the political relationship between just being in a Black or brown body and being policed, you know, in Brazil. And I know that it's a very, very profound issue, and that, again, like you're saying, you know, there's this level of conversation that's been happening for years, you know, and then maybe we get it here, you know, and right now it seems like it's jumping, like, you know, here. And it just hearing about it, I also saw a post just around the world. It's crazy. I think it's in the Netherlands, a politician was saying they're going to stop doing there was a blackface Santa thing that they do. They've been protesting against it for years, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, this is not good, we're going to stop doing it. I mean, it wasn't good yesterday either, but okay. You know, seeing in South Africa, there were signs, a protest about George Floyd, but then this Instagram post talked about all the people who were killed during the quarantine in South Africa and literally what happened to them. And, you know, I just appreciate that, you know, we're pulling the covers off this thing that, you know, is only hidden from people who don't want to see it, you know, and who don't want to deal with it, and who don't want to deal with the implications of what it means that it's okay that we're killing these people, you know.
Yeah, and Hailey can say stuff if they want to.
It's again, it's important to expose and put things on the table to talk. While you were talking, I was thinking that I think 10 years ago, maybe, it was still common to books being published from Machado de Assis and put his picture as white as they could, because they want to masquerade the fact that he was a Black man, and because it would, I don't know, sell better, I don't know, but and it's important to because the silencing and the process, I believe, comes from all the fronts, from every, you know, and so that's what I was thinking. While the last moment that Kiini was talking, that was what I was thinking about, how much of the work that is done to change the conversation to something probably different, you know, like I don't know, like people, I don't know, maybe nowadays I think that I'm out of social media for a long time. I've been trying to protect myself from very toxic conversations and people doing terrible stuff. But the last thing I heard was like, there's the conversation about this recent murder from George, right? Was his name George?
George Floyd, yes.
Floyd, thank you. And the conversation that people from another spectrum was having, oh my God, they are pulling off Gone with the Wind from HBO. It's like, is that the conversation? Why is that conversation happening while this conversation here sounds a little bit more, I don't know the word, important maybe, or you know, I don't know the word.
Constructive,
relevant,
maybe?
Relevant. I think relevant sounds like the best word.
Yeah, I definitely think that this wave of protests is scaring our leaders, the U.S. because maybe in Netherlands there were this blackface event, and why yesterday wasn't problematic but now it is. I think that most of them of our politicians are afraid of rioting. You know, they know that it's a reaction. It's like a a preventive measure, more or less. They are afraid of riots in their community, and then people start rioting not only about police brutality, but also about the conditions, about their about capitalism distortions, about the everything that is wrong with this society. So I think that that's what has driven these politicians to make amends now, some kind of concessions that they wouldn't do before. Because I am part of a socialist organization, and there's a politician in Seattle who have opened the city council to protesters to go in, and she used to say that when we fight, we win, and when we have to push this legislature to do what is necessary to the bare minimum welfare, and we have to keep fighting, because we need more and more until we overthrow capitalists. This is not a process. This is not a easy process, and this is not a process that is going to be from like instantly. But we have to build this fight, and by building this fight is to take advantage of this moment of public insatisfaction, that some kind of writing that explodes in a country, or because of as you said, something that has been for years being denounced, but now we have like, no, that's enough. And I think that to keep this movement and to keep this momentum, we need to keep fighting for, not only as we have seen in the United States now, not only for end of police brutality, but the end of the police as an institution itself, and for universal health care, for and etc. A system against these penal systems that incarcerated black bodies and etc. And I think that this is something that is going to contaminate other countries in a positive way, in order to fight against even our bourgeois media here that never has never speak of racism. Now it's almost even the paid one that it's usually for high middle class is now talking about racism, and actually calling and actually putting black journalists to discuss racism in Brazil, something that I have never ever seen here. They usually just say like a small note or something, oh, that's racism, and okay, let's go with the news. But now we have like a lot of momentum, and they're talking about racism in a positive way, and not profiling not saying that these protests are vandalism or something like that. They're conferring legitimacy to this protest, something that I have never ever seen.
Yeah, and what's incredible is that it's built on years and decades, and of work of people who have protested, parties of 5 who've been protesting and writing letters, and to parties of 20 and parties of whatever. And the last explosion that we had in America, widespread explosion on Ferguson. And, it's built on the fact that if human beings are breathing, they're going to want to be free, and they're going to try and do what they can. And, we haven't always succeeded, but Ian was pointing out what his grandmother had seen over the course of her lifetime. In this moment, as I'm protesting, or as I'm, sort of looking at how we can grow, I do know that my life was definitely much more validated than my parents' life, which was much more validated than their grandparents' life. Even though it feels just incredibly violating, just everything that's happening, I know that I am safer, as a Black person than Black people were, however many years ago. So it's like this weird little incremental spiral, where we're so far behind, but we're all still ahead. But, it's just this tick tock, that, there's a tension that I think you were pointing out, Hailey, between sort of concessions and like, you have to admit this is barbaric, this is crazy. But if we don't stop and admit it now, then, they're going to crawl all over everything that we know we're doing. You know what I mean? And that is happening. This is not a very centralized, localized conversation. This conversation is spreading in every type of direction. I have heard conversations about what publishing paid me. That's been on trending on Twitter, was hashtag what publishing paid me. They're, publicly comparing what different authors are being paid based on race. There's people revealing every time on social media, different companies are now like trying to be like, oh, Black Lives Matter. And then, the people who work there are like, well, you had a code word for Black people when I worked there, or whatever. Like all these conversations are like really erupting around silence that people have been holding in silence, or even if they haven't been holding in silence, they've been speaking into a void where there's no listening, where now there is a listening, and it just comes back to voice, that sometimes you are going to be speaking into a void, and sometimes you're going to be speaking into, a space where people are listening, like, if you're an author and you go out and do readings, you might have one person in the audience, you might have nobody come, and it's just the person who owns the bookstore and at least in the social media age, you could take a picture of yourself and say you had a reading. Nobody needs to know how many people were there. But it's reality is, you use your voice as much for yourself as you do for the people who are listening, and I have so much gratitude to all the activists, everyone who's like forever, for my lifetime and the past lifetime and a lifetime for that, always raising their voice in the face of like, in the face of brutal oppression, physical violence, blacklisting, everything. It's incredible. We would not be having these conversations today if there weren't people, young people, older people, organizing and using their voice on many different fronts.
Well, I think we have to wrap up. Lee is going to kill me. Probably not. People are very happy. They really loved all the conversation we had. We got a lot of positive feedback. And I did too. I'm very happy that this is my table and that my parents are watching.
Whoa.
Hi, Mom. So that's it. Do you want to promote anything, any of you?
Well, I mean, you guys already shared my books. I guess I have 2 short story collections. When the World Wounds is the more recent one, and it is about like, trauma. Basically, it's dark. So if you're not doing well, don't read that book. And then my first collection of short stories, Ancient. So, feel free to support and enjoy.
That's nice.
Well, okay. Should I go next, or Hailey? How do we do it? Me, Hailey?
Go on. Go ahead.
I'll go. Okay, I'll go ahead. So there's really, I don't really have anything to because I'm really independent writer, and all my books are with me. So, and I can't go to the street to mail them. So there's really nothing to say about my work. You can find digitally on Amazon, and is this a goodbye, or is this just the talking about our work?
This is the talk about your work.
Okay. So you can find my work on Amazon. You can find my work and also in the Piru Editora site, and on Moinhos Editora site. You can find the 2 books that I have published now that you can buy all around Brazil, because Mario, which is Omar 1.0, you can't buy outside Bahia. It's only It's very local publishing house. So those are the places you can find me, and you can find me on now you can't find me anywhere because I turned off my Facebook and my Instagram. I'm completely living in the caves. I as I said, I am not opening web mails or sites. I'm pretty out of the grid, but once everything comes out, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Tell them when Aruarama 3 is coming out.
It was gonna come. Aruarama 3 was coming out exactly 1 week after it was declared that we were supposed to stay home on. So now it's I had to cancel the what's the name of the crowdfunding, because my work on crowdfunding is very based on how people interact with me, and I have to be happy and I have to celebrate, and I could not imagine someone scrolling down, and seeing me celebrate that I got 50%, and the next news is, I don't know, 2,000 people are dead. It didn't feel, it felt very wrong, and so I canceled, and it will only come back once there's actually, I will feel free to celebrate. Not free, but comfortable to celebrate, because I really don't feel like doing it right now.
Hailey, do you want to plug anything?
Yeah, I think I'll just talk a little about the Transfeminismo project, which is a project led by trans people, and the website is in Portuguese. So, but we are planning to translate it into English. I don't know when, but there are plans to do it. But it is a website aimed to discuss trans issues in light of trans feminism. So I want to highlight that, and also the ASI website, which is the SI. It's we just changed the name recently, so I'm kind of thinking about the new name. Is the Socialist Alternative website, SA, which is because, as Deborah said in the beginning, I was a candidate for a local, I don't know how to say not deputy, but Deborah could help me. I forgot the name in English.
I really don't know. For the government.
It's for the House, the House. I was a candidate for the House of Legislative. And so I am a socialist, and the SA, Socialist Alternative in US, is our organization in US, and in Brazil is LSR, Liberdade, Socialismo e Revolução. So if you want to know more about our fight and how we articulate these issues with the issues of racism and trans issues, LGBTQ issues, and we try to discuss a lot of these things, because we know that the traditional Marxist left has this bad reputation of not discussing class, not discussing race, and not discussing LGBT issues. So we're trying to do a different work in this front. So anyway, I'm just a translator. I don't have anything I write published yet. Yes, because I'm just I write a lot of nonfiction. So starting to write fiction now is being a really challenge for me, because I tend to rationalize everything. But anyway, so you can just find my text in Portuguese on Medium also. So it's Hailey Kaas. Thank you.
Well, I guess we're it. We'll actually wrap up now. Thank you so much for being with us, Kiini. It was so good. We have been discussing in the people that brought this event to life, and every table that we have, we think, well, this is going to be the best. Nothing is going to top this. And then the other one is like, oh my God, and mind blowing and everything. And everybody really likes it. So we're so happy. So as of now, this is the best table. It might not be tomorrow anymore, but I'm still going to think it's going to be the best because it is mine. And so thank you so much for being here. I'm going to switch back to Portuguese now, to give our last remarks to the people. Muito obrigada a todo mundo que assistiu. Obrigada, Ian. Obrigada, Hailey. Foi ótimo ter vocês aqui. Eu acho que a Kiini travou, na real. Ela tá paradinha há muito tempo na mesma pose. Enfim. Super obrigada para todo mundo que mandou 1 milhão de perguntas. Eu fiquei sabendo que esse foi a live que mais teve perguntas. Fico muito feliz. Quero mandar um beijo para os meus pais de novo, que eu sei que eles estão assistindo. E porque eu sempre quis fazer isso. E é isso, galera. Continuem assistindo a programação. Às 5 horas, daqui a pouquinho, vocês vão ter tempo de ir no banheiro e tomar uma água. A gente vai ter a próxima mesa...
O Francesco.
Vai ser com o Francesco Verso, que é um editor italiano. E ele acabou de lançar uma antologia solarpunk, então ele vai falar de ficção científica feliz, ao contrário de tudo isso que a gente está fazendo até agora. Vai ser com o Fábio Fernandes e o Valdson de Souza. E o Valdson, ele estuda e ele escreve afrofuturismo, então acho que vai ser muito legal. Assistam, vai ser ótimo. E para retomar a conversa, se vocês também quiserem doar para a campanha do Sobrevivendo ao Corona, que está fazendo uma campanha, né, para ajudar pessoas da periferia de São Paulo a se manter, a comprar comida e sobreviver, né, a esses tempos que estão muito difíceis. É isso. Obrigada por assistir. Continuem com a gente até o domingo. E é isso.
Obrigado.